That morning, my thumb lingered over the cell phone screen while the old grandfather clock in my living room kept up its steady, rhythmic ticking. I typed out a single dollar for the transfer amount, added the word congratulations in the memo line, and tapped the confirmation button. Outside my window, the neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio was completely quiet, entirely oblivious to the fact that my world had just fundamentally shifted. I slowly placed the device on the kitchen counter, picked up my landline, and dialed a local locksmith to request an immediate total lock replacement for every single door in my home. 3 hours later, the technician handed me a brand new set of brass keys and drove away, leaving me standing in absolute silence. Before 20 minutes had passed, heavy fists began hammering wildly against my front door, rattling the decorative glass panel in its frame. My daughter was screaming for me to open up, her voice sharp with sudden confusion as her old key uselessly spun inside the deadbolt. Standing just inches away on the other side of the wood, I calmly informed her that I had deliberately changed every lock, refusing to unlock the door despite her husband shouting demands at me from the porch. When she realized I was not going to give in, my daughter called the local police department, claiming her own mother had locked her out of her family residence. Sitting quietly inside as the patrol car pulled into my driveway, I could not help but reflect on how surreal my life had suddenly become. 34 years earlier, I had brought that very same girl home from the hospital wrapped in a baby blanket, bringing her into a house that I had worked decades to pay off. Now, she was standing on my lawn trying to convince uniformed officers that she had a legal right to enter a home that belonged entirely to me. My name is Margaret, and for more than 3 decades I earned an honest living working double shifts as a hospital nurse. I was never a wealthy woman, but I took immense pride in providing a comfortable, steady life for my family through exhausting shift work. When my husband passed away from illness, leaving our daughter without a father at 12 years old, I made a silent vow to devote every spare second of my life to raising her. I traded my rest days to attend her dance recitals, worked overtime to clear her future college tuition, and did everything humanly possible to ensure she never felt abandoned. All those years of sacrifice seemed completely worth it when I watched her walk across the stage at her college graduation without a single cent of student debt. But everything began to subtly change the moment a wealthy corporate consultant entered her life, bringing along an inner circle accustomed to private clubs and lavish lifestyles. Slowly, my daughter began pulling away from me, making excuses for short visits, sending rushed text messages, and gradually leaving me out of family gatherings. It was painful to watch her drift, but I tried my best to swallow my pride and convince myself that she was simply busy building her new future. The turning point arrived on a quiet afternoon when my daughter came over to my house alone, unable to even look me in the eye as she sat at my kitchen table. With a nervous tremor in her voice, she explained that her fiancé and his wealthy parents felt I would look completely out of place at their high-end wedding ceremony. They were deeply concerned about their public image, and my simple attire and working-class background simply did not fit into the elegant picture they wanted to project to their wealthy friends. She sat there in silence as I absorbed the devastating realization that my own child was deeply embarrassed to have her own mother stand beside her on her special day. Instead of causing a dramatic scene or pleading for an invitation, I simply nodded, swallowed my immense grief, and let her walk out of my life without an argument. On the morning of her grand wedding, I sat alone on a quiet park bench near a local lake, watching other families enjoy their weekend together in the sun. That evening, I happened to see event photos posted online showing a lavish celebration filled with dozens of happy guests. Yet, there was not a single trace of my existence anywhere in that room. It felt as if she had deliberately erased me from her life story, leaving me to grieve the living child I had spent my entire life raising. 5 days passed without a single call, apology, or message checking on my well-being after such a cruel exclusion. Then, out of nowhere, my phone vibrated with a brief text message from her, casually asking if I could transfer $5,000 to cover their upcoming luxury vacation. There was no greeting, no remorse, and not even a simple inquiry about how I was doing after being thrown away so callously. Reading those cold words, I finally recognized that I had allowed myself to become nothing more than a convenient bank account to a daughter who no longer respected me as a mother. That final realization brought a strange, overwhelming sense of clarity, prompting me to send that single symbolic dollar along with a final message of congratulations before hiring the locksmith. When the police officers arrived at my front porch, I stepped outside with my property deed in hand, calmly explaining to the officers that my adult daughter did not reside at this address. The officers quickly understood the situation, politely informing my daughter and her husband that they were trespassing on private property and needed to leave immediately. Standing on the porch, my daughter looked at me with a mix of shock and desperation, realizing for the very first time that her actions carried real consequences. As their car finally pulled out of my driveway, a quiet peace settled over the house that had been missing for a very long time. I walked back inside, locked the front door with my new key, and sat down at the kitchen table with a warm cup of tea. I knew the road ahead would be quiet and long, but I no longer felt the heavy burden of trying to buy the affection of someone who only saw my value in dollars. Standing up for my own dignity was the hardest lesson I ever had to teach my daughter. But as the old clock ticked quietly on the wall, I knew it was the right one.